The Cherry XTRFY NGALE X is a USB XLR dynamic cardioid microphone, much like the Shure MV7 and the MV7 Plus, as well as the Rode PodMic USB, as well as a bunch of FiFine and Mayano microphones and a bunch of other clones that have come out since then. But I will say the NGALE X does closely resemble the Shure SM7b. Which, I mean, for whatever reason, is the gold standard now on YouTube and podcasts and stuff. But the NGALE X comes in at a significant discount compared to the SM7B. This comes in at $150 for USB and XLR. But the NGALE X, being essentially an SM7B clone, was like, hey, we're going to try something different here. We're going to think outside the box. We're not just going to do USB and XLR. We're also going to put some RGB lights on it because no one's done that before. So yeah, in USB mode, it does have RGB lights. But if you push in the button on the back and hold it for 2 seconds, it will cycle through all of the different RGB colors. And then eventually you will get to the one that it doesn't show any, which is what I want. But if it's your thing, no problem. I actually think I liked the RGB lights on the first few mics that I tried that did have it, but then it just kept on happening and I was just over it. So if you like it, that's cool, but I'm just sick of it. And since XLR USB mics are pretty big, I will have a comparison in that I will include the SM7B since it looks like it and is, a clone essentially. So stay tuned for that comparison here in a little bit, or just jump to it now through the timestamps if you aren't interested in the review section of this. But it might not be a surprise to you that Bark from Obscure Mics and I are really good friends. We're best of friends. He says acquaintances all the time, but I know that he likes me, I think. We do have a podcast together, Obscure Hotline, but speaking of podcasts, Bart kind of started this whole thing where he did review this mic and he heard a podcast, which he then sent to me, where they were kind of like hating on this mic and another Cherry XTRFY mic. So he went on his own journey to see how these mics sound, and I did the same thing. We'll go a little bit more into that in a little bit, but first let me tell you about the accessories that come with this. When you receive the NGALE X, it will come with a desktop stand. When you first get it, it will just be a base and an extender, but you just screw those into each other and you're good to go. It comes with a Cherry XTRFY branded windscreen, which I'll just be honest, some people aren't going to like. Additionally, this will come with a USB-C to USB-A cable. The USB-C connection is at a 90-degree angle, as well as the microphone itself, which is a full metal build. Now, when it comes to the build of the NGALE X, I'm just going to call it X from now on because it's just so much easier. But the X really is a very good build for $150. It feels, to me, a little less premium than the SM7B, but it's pretty dang close. Even these little rubber grippies are nice, but I will say that when it comes to handling the mic, it is noisy. So even with the rubberized little grippy things, it's just not good. But even the desk stand is built really well. I do feel like it is just too short for a majority of people in a majority of situations. I even have the Gator Frameworks quick release on top of that, and I still have to use this little helper box to get it to the right height. But the Cherry XTRFY branded foam windscreen is a little bit of a miss. As you can see, there are some little notches that only allow it to essentially be right side up or upside down. If it wasn't for that, I would have the windscreen like this. I've literally done something similar, but those notches just kind of make you put it on right. But there are other options out there. This colorful one is made by Doc Rock, and it is a little bit better at plosive rejection than the traditional SM7B windscreen. So I would encourage you to look at this. I think they're around $20. I will leave a non-affiliate link. I am not affiliated with him. He's just a friend, an acquaintance according to him, but whatever. But I'll leave a link down in the description. But on the back of this microphone, you will find a dial. This can be used to dial in your headphone volume, but it is actually the mute button also. If you just briefly press it, it will mute it. But if you hold it down for more than 2 seconds, it will change the RGB lights. Next to that, you do have an EQ switch that does just seem like a high-pass filter. And next to that, there is a 3.5mm headphone jack, as well as a USB-C port. And by the 5/8 mount, there is the XLR port, which is very similar and reminiscent to the SM7b. And I'll just mention this with the features really quick, but this microphone is capable of recording 24-bit up to 96 kilohertz. Now let's go ahead and get into some tests. Right now I'm 3 feet away from the X microphone, and I gotta step over a cat to do this, but currently I am 2 feet away, and don't step on the kitty cat, and now I am 1 foot away. And now I'm gonna get a little bit closer to it. I'm worried that X is gonna give it to me. And now I am right on top of the microphone. And right now I'm 6 inches away from the microphone, and just right down the barrel, I'm going to give it some plosives. Planters pickled peanutses. Planters pickled peanutses. And now I'm aiming my air past the microphone. Planters pickled peanutses. Planters pickled peanutses. And now I'm just talking directly into the microphone at 0 degrees, and now I'm going to slowly turn the microphone. Now we are at 90 degrees. Now I'm going to slowly turn it again. Now we are at 180 degrees. And now I'm going to keep turning, baby. And now we're at 90 degrees. And now I'm going to keep turning. The handling noise on this mic is so bad, 0 degrees. And now I'm just going to talk to you, actually. Hey there. While I bang on some MX Cherry Blues. And I bet that it's just leaking through the stand and it's just not sounding great. But here we go. Here's the sound. Now for the test that you didn't know you needed, but now you can't get enough of it. The kitty purr test. And now here is just a real quick example of that EQ switch. Here is it not enabled, and now the EQ switch is enabled, and I'm sure that you've noticed that it just sounds like a high pass filter. And now it is disabled, it is the microphone in flat mode, and once again the EQ switch is enabled, also known as the high pass filter. And just so you know, the EQ switch will only function in USB mode. Okay, now let's go ahead and test the mute feature on this microphone. In order to mute it, you'll just press in the main dial like I'm about to do. And I'm pretty sure that that did have a pretty audible click. I was watching the waveform. Let's try it one more time. Okay, yeah, not great. So now I'm in a completely untreated room with the Cherry XTRFY NGALE X. And yes, I am holding it because I was too lazy to grab a mic stand, but I am recording it directly from the USB-C port into my iPhone 15 Pro in the iRig Recorder app in the high quality mode, 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. But here's how it sounds in an untreated room. A dynamic microphone like this should do a good job when I'm this close to it, but if I were to back up a little bit, you should be able to hear more of the room and everything than when I'm like this. But I was struggling to find the windscreen that comes with this microphone, so I just went with the purple windscreen that's actually just like the Amazon special. It's like $8 or something like that. Very inexpensive windscreen. But I am curious how the windscreen will do in this situation, but this has been an untreated room test for the NGALE X. So right now I have the NGALE X going against the Shure SM7b, and it does in fact have the booster on right now. Here in just a second I will disable the booster so you can hear how the original SM7b would sound, but this is a comparison between a $150 mic and a $500 mic, since the DB is a little bit more expensive than the SM7b. But now with these two side by side, it's apparent where the NGALE X gets its looks from. I did just disable the booster in the SM7DB, so now it's an SM7B. And that is one thing that I do want to stress really quick, is if I need to make an adjustment of where the mic is hitting with the SM7DB or the SM7B, it's going to be very minimal noise versus this. I mean, even if I just, limit my touching to the rubber pads that I would assume are there for that, it might just be so it looks cool, I'm not sure. But it is significantly more noisy. It's just something to take into consideration. But this has been a quick comparison of the SM7B versus the NGALE X. Now I'm talking on the Rode PodMic USB, but it is plugged in through XLR right now. And of course over here we have the NGALE X. But just for this first little section, I will have it be XLR, but then I will switch over to USB. But while I am doing this XLR test, I am using the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 for both of them. And the PodMic USB does come in at $200, which is $50 more than the X. Now I'm plugged in through USB on each microphone. And yes, I was pulling a fast one on you. It wasn't a color grading joke. I was actually switching all the different pop filters on the PodMic. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I went a little crazy. But currently I don't have DSP enabled on the Rode PodMic USB, and there isn't any DSP available for the Cherry XTRFY NGALE X, which is another conversation. So just so you can hear a quick difference, I do currently have the Rode PodMic USB DSP enabled on Rode Connect, and I obviously don't have any of that for the NGALE X. Now let's go ahead and move on to another mic. So now I have the Shure MV7 Plus that comes in at $279, going against the $150 NGALE X from Cherry XTRFY. Currently I do not have any DSP enabled for the MV7 Plus, and obviously I don't have any DSP because there is no DSP for the Cherry XTRFY NGALE X, but now I will enable the DSP for the MV7, then we will move to the XLR test. So now I have enabled pretty much everything from the DSP. Let's go through the list. I have the limiter on, I have a medium compressor on, I do have the tone slightly leaning toward dark, and then I have the denoiser and pop stopper on. Versus no DSP from the NGALE X, but the MV7 Plus is nearly twice the price, so it is kind of hard to compare the two. So now I have both of these plugged into the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, both going into the XLR jacks. And one thing to mention really quick that is very frustrating and very annoying, at least for me in this instance, is that I'm not allowed to plug in XLR and USB through the NGALE X, but I also can't do that on the PodMic USB. However, I can do that on the MV7 Plus and some other ones that we will test here in a little bit. There are so many options you have if you can plug both of those ports in, and it is just a bummer when you can't. And I will say that is a bit of a downfall for the NGALE X, especially when there are cheaper options out there like the FiFine AM8 that will allow you to do that. But rant over. This has been an XLR test for the MV7 Plus versus the NGALE X. Now we have the FiFine AM8, usually about $55. It is USB and XLR, going against the $150 NGALE X. And one absolutely huge advantage, in my opinion, is that it can do XLR and USB at the same time, where the NGALE X cannot. And an even bigger advantage is that the FiFine does come in white, black, and pink. Okay, that wasn't really a big advantage, but I'm just letting you know, it does. But this first section, you have been listening to the XLR connection. Now let's go ahead and switch over to USB. Now the FiFine AM8 is plugged in through USB, going against the NGALE X, and here's how that sounds. The one disadvantage that you have with the FiFine that is 66% less money is that it is 16-bit at 48 kilohertz, versus the Cherry NGALE X, 24-bit 96 kilohertz, which is a pretty big difference, but for the average person that's going to be using one of these microphones, it's not going to be noticeable. And also, as a USB microphone, I've got to give it to the FiFine versus the NGALE X. It has a headphone volume control, a gain volume control, and it just has everything that is really nice, and a mute button that isn't tactile, so it doesn't like click in when you mute it. It just mutes it. It's beautiful. But if you do like the traditional SM7B look and you don't like the super bright lights and maybe you just want a little flare, then the NGALE X is a better option in that right. But this has just been a quick USB test between the FiFine AM8 and the NGALE X. And now we have a little bit of an oldie, but a Sam goodie. If you know what that is, we're officially friends. But I did have to put a little clown nose on it. The original windscreen that came with it got chewed by my cat, so it happens. But this is the Samson Q2U. It is usually around $60. It is capped at 16-bit, 48 kilohertz, but it is going against the NGALE X. And both of these are on the USB connection right now. And once again, the Q2U, the much cheaper option, can do both at the same time, whereas the NGALE X cannot. But now we have both of these options plugged into XLR. It's going through the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 4th generation. But if you don't know much about the Samson Q2U, it was released about 20 years ago, which is just crazy to think. It was a little bit before the RGB craze. But the NGALE X was released, I believe, in the last year or so. But here is how the Samson Q2U sounds in XLR mode and the NGALE X in XLR mode. Now I'm going to get into my review of the Cherry XTRFY NGALE X, but one of the first things that I noticed about this device, I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so right now I just wanted to briefly show you what I've been experiencing with the XTRFY NGALE X. It is bizarre, but as you can see, I'm hitting around negative 12 decibels with my peaks, which is what I usually go for. So when I first went to the input volume, it was set to 68%. And yeah, I would say that is probably the amount that you want to leave here, because if you go up, you learn that clipping around negative 11 decibels is a thing with this microphone. So let's just max it out. And I apologize for the sound. So look at that. It is just clipping all over the place, but we're not even at 11 decibels. We're at like 11 and a half. So I'm kind of at a loss here. I don't really know what is going on, but I just figured I'd come on here and tell you that regardless of where I'm at, I will clip there. So I'm going to do like a low metal screen because I know that I'll get there. Just beware. Maybe I won't play the metal screen, but as you can see right there, it did clip at the exact same place, the exact same amount is when I'm right here. So it's just, I don't know, man. It's just weird. So yeah, you could say it's been a little bit of a challenge. In USB mode, I've just had to give myself some extra headroom, but this microphone is meant for gamers and streamers, and in a situation like that, with the problem that I was having with it clipping around negative 11.5 dB, it would be really difficult to make it work in a live stream setting if I was using USB. But rest assured, I did talk to Bark from Obscure Mics. He didn't have this problem at all, and I was just unlucky enough to have that problem, I guess. But I did mention a podcast that the sound was just really off on with the NGALE X, and I'm starting to think that maybe it was just the microphone being bad. I really hope I'm wrong when I say this, and maybe it is just two instances of a microphone not functioning properly or something, but the quality control of this company just doesn't seem very good, at least in the microphone department. But, and this is the biggest but you've ever seen, this microphone sounds awesome. And just for fun, to add a little flair to it, I did add the Dock Pop from Dock Rock. Once again, I'll leave the link in the description. But yeah, when it comes to the sound department, I feel like this microphone punches above its weight. And even if I was just going to get it as an XLR mic, I would get it. And a big part of me just has to hope that the USB problems that I suffered through with this aren't a thing. And I was just unlucky. And as much as I do hate to hate on another podcast, I really could see that one just being user error. So the build quality of the NGALE X is really great, but the handling noise is not very good, which for a lot of people isn't going to be a big problem. But if you are a person that is constantly putting your hands on your microphone and moving it this way and that way and stuff, probably don't get this. So there are a couple things that I do want to clarify really quick, and Keela left and is just making me look like an idiot now. Cool. Please stay. Please don't make me look dumb. Even though I already look dumb. 0 for 2 on that, but oh well. The main thing is that I didn't know that this little bolt would be loose as soon as I got the microphone. And so when I was shaking the microphone quite a bit and handling it and doing the handling noise tests, it was actually this little area between the yoke mount where it screws into the area that you mount it. And that was actually what was causing a majority of the noise. However, if I grab the mic and adjust it, it still isn't great by any means. It's not SM7b good, but it's not nearly as bad. Additionally, I did want to make this very clear. I tried my iPhone, my Mac, my second Mac, my iPad, 2 PCs with this microphone, and all of them clipped around negative and at 11, around negative 11.5 decibels. So it wasn't just one device that I tried or anything like that. It was all of them. But if you are looking for a microphone in this price category, it is weird for me to say considering I did deal with the USB problem. I would recommend this. But I do have to take into consideration the USB problem. But if you are looking for an XLR mic, this could be a good option. But on the BBSAR, through the XLR port, I would give this an 8. But through the USB port, I would probably give it a 4 because I was able to make it work and make this whole review work with that same problem through USB, and I was able to boost it in post and everything, and it was fine. So for a lot of people, the problem that I experienced would be workable, but I would just recommend sending it back and getting a new one, obviously. But for the sound and the build quality, and yes, it doesn't have great handling noise, but if the XLR and USB ports are functioning properly, I would sit this around an 8. But thank you all for watching this review. A big thank you goes to Kevin from Cherry XTRFY for being so hospitable and nice to work with. But the biggest thank you goes to the members of the Audio Hotline. I'll see you audio nerds next time.